Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Before this story starts, notice the detail that matters most. When somebody protects a friendship more fiercely than they protect your peace, the problem is usually not confusion. It is a priority. In this one, the silence at dinner was not the first betrayal. It was just the first time nobody could pretend not to hear it. Sometimes your real decision point comes weeks earlier, when your gut keeps asking for honesty and all you get back is performance. My name is Solomon Pierce, and the night my marriage finally split open smelled like brown butter, rosemary, and rain on hot concrete. It was early October in Baltimore, one of those damp evenings when everybody's jackets hang by the door and the windows fog at the corners. My wife, Janine, had invited her family over for Sunday dinner because her mother liked one proper meal together before the cold set in. The dining room table was dressed with her good cream runner, the one she only used on holidays and serious occasions, though she swore this was neither. I knew better. My chest had been tight since noon. Janine was 38. Sharp as a paper cut, always polished, always reaching to smooth some invisible wrinkle in the world. She corrected restaurant menus under her breath. She folded grocery bags into perfect triangles and lined them inside the pantry basket. She laughed with her whole face when she meant it, but for the last 4 months that laugh had been rationed out to somebody on her phone, never to me. I was 41. A city bus mechanic with grease under my nails no matter how long I scrubbed. A man who believed if something rattled, you found a bolt and tightened it. Marriage, I had learned too late, did not work like an engine. Her brother Marcus arrived first, carrying sweet potato pie from a bakery on Liberty Road and complaining that they had raised their prices again. Her mother, Denise, came in behind him with a covered dish of green beans and that church lady perfume she had worn for as long as I had known her. Her father, Harold, brought nothing except a weather report and a look that could quiet a room. Their niece Nia, home from Morgan State for the weekend, drifted in last with rain in her curls and one earbud still hanging from her coat collar. Everybody was normal. That almost made it worse. If you have ever watched somebody you love start pulling away right in front of you, stay with this story, because what happened at that dinner table did not start there. And before we go further, like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful relationship drama, and subscribe for more stories like this. Janine moved through the kitchen like she always did when people were watching, efficient, graceful, all clean lines. She basted the chicken, adjusted the flame under the rice, and smiled at the right moments. But every few minutes, her phone lit up near the fruit bowl, and a tiny change came over her. Not guilt exactly. Anticipation. A secret pulse under the skin. She would glance down, her mouth twitching at one corner, then flip the screen face down if I took a step too close. Nobody else seemed to notice. Or maybe they noticed and did what families do when they want peace more than truth. I had noticed because there had been a beginning, and I could trace it if I let myself. It started in June, the week the city baked under a heat wave, and the buses came back to the depot carrying the smell of hot vinyl and tired people. Janine had started talking about a consultant at her nonprofit, a man named Terrence Bell, who was helping with a grant campaign. He thinks in headlines, she told me once, stirring sugar into her iced tea. It is annoying but useful. I did not like how often his name came up. I told myself I was being childish. At first it was ordinary enough. Work stories, deadlines, office politics. Janine had always brought her work home in little pieces. Lay it on our kitchen counter while I cut onions or pack leftovers. But then the story stopped sounding like stories and started sounding like curation. She would mention Terrence in passing, then watch my face too carefully. She bought a new blouse, because the donor lunch might be formal. She started taking her laptop onto the back porch after dinner. When I came out with a glass of water, she would minimize the screen too fast. Small things. The kind people build excuses around. I made my first wrong decision in July. I saw his name flash across her lock screen when she was in the shower. Just a preview. Can't stop thinking about what you said. Nothing more. I stood there with her phone in my hand. hearing the shower pipes knock on the wall, knowing I had a narrow window to look deeper. I did not. I set the phone back exactly where it had been and hated myself for being relieved. I chose dignity over information because I wanted proof of my trust more than proof of the truth. For 2 weeks after that, I performed calmly like it was a second job. I fixed a loose cabinet hinge in the laundry room. I rotated the tires on Janine's SUV. I stood beside her at a church picnic in Druid Hill Park and held her lemonade while she talked to women from the choir, though she had not sung in the choir for years. I told myself faithful people do not investigate every odd thing. Faithful people ask direct questions. So one Thursday night I did. I asked, "Are you talking to somebody in a way that would hurt me?" She stared like I had slapped a stranger. "No," she said, very even, too even. "I am talking to a co-worker who understands the stress of my job. That is not a crime." She said co-worker the way some people say child, as if the word itself made the subject innocent. I asked why she had the phone. She laughed once, brittle and small, and said I was turning middle-aged insecurity into theater. That cut deeper than I let show. I nodded, apologized for asking badly, and went out to the garage where I sat on an overturned paint bucket for an hour staring at a broken leaf blower I had no intention of fixing. August came in thick and loud. Cicadas hummed in the sycamores behind our row house. The corner store on Reisterstown Road started stocking cinnamon brooms before Labor Day. Janine grew softer in some ways and harder in others. She complimented my shirts more often, touched my shoulder in passing, and asked whether I wanted peach cobbler from the bakery near her office. It should have felt like a repair. Instead, it felt like management. The harder part came whenever I reached toward whatever sat between us. Then she turned clipped, impatient, polished like a lawyer. "I cannot be punished for your imagination," she told me one morning while tying her scarf. There were practical differences, too, the kind that do not sound dramatic until you live inside them. Janine stopped leaving grocery lists on the fridge because she preferred an app. She began driving to work on days she usually took the light rail because she said she needed flexibility. She guarded her tote bag. She changed the code on her tablet. She started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, not with hostility, but with an absent-minded drift, as if her body had learned another map. At night, I would watch the red digits of the clock crawl forward and wonder when suspicion turns into humiliation. Labor Day weekend, we drove to Columbia to watch my cousin's son play in a high school marching band showcase. The air smelled like kettle corn and cut grass. Brass notes bounced over the bleachers. During halftime, Janine said she was going to find the restroom. 20 minutes later, I spotted her near the concession stand, back half-turned, smiling down at her phone with the kind of softness people reserve for babies and first dates. I walked over slowly enough to give her a chance to notice me. She did not until I was 3 feet away. Her smile vanished before she looked up. That told me plenty. I made my second decision there. I could have confronted her beside the mustard pumps and those tired volunteers selling bottled water for $2. I could have demanded the phone, made a scene, forced something public and ugly. Instead, I said, "The band's back on," and walked with her to the bleachers. I chose restraint because my mother raised me to never hand your private pain to a crowd unless you are prepared to lose control of what they do with it. I still think that choice was right, but restraint has a price. It gives liars more room to decorate. 3 nights later, I found the receipt. It was in the cup holder of her SUV. Folded into a neat square like trash she meant to throw out, but forgot. A jazz restaurant on the harbor. 2 entrees. 1 old-fashioned, 1 sparkling water. Wednesday, 9:48 p.m. Janine had told me she was staying late for board materials and grabbed a granola bar on the way out. I sat in the driver's seat with that paper in my fingers and felt something inside me go still. Not explode. Not shatter. Still, like a judge taking the bench after listening long enough. I waited until she came home. She set down her bag, kicked off her pumps, and asked whether I had fed the cat. I held up the receipt. She looked at it, then at me, and there was a briefest delay before her face arranged itself. "We went after the donor meeting," she said. "A group of us." I asked for the itemized statement from the work card. She said she did not have access. I asked who had the old-fashioned. She said she did not remember. That answer, more than anything, offended me. Janine remembered everybody's drink. That was one of her things. The next week, Harold invited me to his barbershop on Pennsylvania Avenue, though he did not need a cut and neither did I. He owned the place once years ago, before passing to Marcus and retiring into a restless half-life of gardening and church committees. The shop still smelled like talc, aftershave, and radio static. Men argued over the Orioles, while clippers hummed like insects. Harold handed me a ginger ale from the fridge in the back and asked, without looking at me, "Everything all right at home?" I learned then that trouble leaks. Even when nobody says the words, it leaves a stain. I told him, "I think something is wrong." He nodded as if I had confirmed the weather. He did not rush to defend his daughter. He did not tell me I was overreacting. He just said, "There are some people who would rather be admired than be known. Marriage gets hard for them when admiration fades." That line sat in my chest all afternoon. Janine loved being known when it came with praise. She could tell childhood stories for hours if the audience was tender enough, but known in the ugly places, in loneliness, selfishness, cowardice, that she could not bear. Mid-September, our anniversary came and went like a missed bus. 12 years. I had reserved a table, a quiet place in Mount Vernon, with piano music and candlelight that always made Janine pretend she was not crying when she was. That morning she texted that an emergency campaign call had been scheduled and asked if we could move the celebration to the weekend. I stared at the message while standing in line at a coffee cart near the depot. A woman ahead of me ordered oatmeal and extra cinnamon. A siren wailed 3 blocks away. Life kept moving while my marriage was being quietly rewritten. I did not move the reservation. I went alone. I wore the navy blazer Janine bought me for my 40th birthday, sat at a table for 2, and ate salmon I barely tasted. Around 8 o'clock, I looked across the room and saw Terrence Bell in person for the first time. I knew it was him from the staff page I had studied like a fool. He was broader than his photos, with silver at the temples and the practiced ease of man who thought every room would make space for him. Janine was not with him. He was with donors. That almost gave me hope. Hope lasted exactly until I walked to my truck and saw Janine's SUV 2 streets over, parked beside a small hotel with a blue awning, not in the lot, but tucked along the curb like someone trying not to be seen. I sat across from it for 40 minutes. I saw nobody go in. I saw nobody come out. Then I saw Janine appear from the side entrance with Terrence beside her, both carrying coffee cups. They were not touching. Sometimes not touching is louder. They stood under the awning talking close, comfortable, familiar. Then she laughed and pressed his wrist. I drove away before she could see me. I wish I could say I handled that discovery with immediate nobility. I did not. I pulled into a gas station near Mondawmin, bought a bottle of water I could not swallow, and leaned over the trash and tried not to come apart in public. I kept hearing the tiny details. Anniversary, emergency call, hotel awning, coffee cups. My mind ran wild in every direction, then circled back to the same ugly place. Maybe it had been emotional only. Maybe it had been more. Maybe the difference mattered. Maybe it did not. Betrayal had already entered the house. Arguing over its shoes felt pathetic. For the next 10 days, I watched. I am not proud of that sentence, but I will not stand it down either. I checked the mileage on her SUV. I learned her office calendar by glimpses. I noted when she wore perfume on weekday afternoons. I hated the man I became in those days, half detective, half beggar, waiting for reality to finally stop insulting me. What I found was enough. A hidden photo folder on our shared tablet that synced before she caught the setting. No bodies, no hotel room, nothing explicit. Just selfies of the 2 of them at lunch. Heads too close, eyes too bright. The one that undid me was taken outside a farmer's market in Fells Point. Terrence held a bouquet of sunflowers, and Janine leaned toward him, smiling the smile she wore in our wedding pictures. There was a chalkboard behind them advertising apple butter and local honey. Such an ordinary background for the end of a marriage. I sat at the kitchen table with that photo enlarged on the screen until the phone numbers of the people I could call blurred before me. My sister, my pastor, Marcus, a lawyer. I called nobody. Some grief is too young to speak out loud. Then Denise invited us for Sunday dinner. Nothing fancy, she said on speakerphone while Janine stacked mail beside the fruit bowl. Just family. Janine looked up and met my eyes for a second too long. I think she knew by then that I knew more than I had said. The air between us had changed. It had become formal. She thanked me for taking out the trash. I thanked her for folding my work shirts. We spoke like co-workers assigned to a shared project. When Denise named a menu, roasted chicken, rice pilaf, green beans, pie, I heard something else entirely. Witness. I spent that whole Sunday morning at the bus depot, though I had the day off. There is comfort in fluorescent light and familiar noise when your home feels staged. I changed the brake chamber on a bus that was not even on my roster. My friend Leon found me there and said, "Man, you work like you owe somebody." I almost told him everything. Instead, I asked whether he still had that spare room over his garage in Catonsville. He studied my face, then said yes. No questions. I loved him for that. By noon, I had a place to go if the night blew apart. At Denise and Harold's house, the living room smelled like furniture polish and cinnamon candles. Their old clock chimed a quarter hour off, like it always had. Football murmured from the den. Rain tapped the windows. Janine wore a rust-colored sweater and gold hoops. The outfit I once told her made her look like fall had chosen a favorite person. She knew exactly what she was doing wearing it. That was the cruel part. She could still reach for sweetness while standing ankle-deep in deceit. During grace, Harold thanked God for clarity where there has been confusion. I looked up. He did not. Dinner started harmlessly. Marcus joked that Denise still overcooked green beans on purpose because soft vegetables made her feel superior. Nia rolled her eyes and stole extra cranberry relish. Denise asked me about a hybrid bus program the city was piloting, and I answered with more detail than necessary just to keep my hands occupied around the water glass. Janine laughed twice at things that were not that funny, but each laugh arrived right after her phone buzzed in her lap. I could hear the faint vibration through the chair legs. That tiny sound had become the metronome of my humiliation. I had not planned the exact wording. People think moments like that come out rehearsed, polished, sharpened in advance. Mine did not. Mine came from exhaustion. Janine looked down one more time, smiled at something glowing in her palm, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear in that absent little gesture she did when she forgot I existed. I set my fork down. The silver clinked against china. Nobody noticed at first. Then I said very plain, "Janine, choose now. Our marriage or him." No yelling. No table slap. Just a sentence spoken clean enough that nobody could mishear it. The room changed shape. Nia's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. Marcus sat back, so fast his chair squeaked. Denise blinked at me once, then twice, as if her eyes needed to refocus the scene. Harold put down his napkin. Janine turned slowly, phone still in her hand. For 1 second I saw a naked panic. Then came calculation. Then nothing at all. That nothing was the part one remembered most. Not outrage. Not denial. Vacancy. She glanced at her mother, then her father, then at the gravy boat in the center of the table, like it might answer for her. She said nothing. I gave her more mercy than she ever admitted. 5 seconds. 10. 15. I wanted to believe she would look at me and choose with her whole chest, even if the choice was to leave. I could have respected honesty then. Instead, she whispered, "Solomon, not here." I heard what she meant. Not in front of witnesses, not in a room where image cannot survive, not where my family has to see what I have done. So I answered, "Here's exactly where." Then I slid my chair back, took off my ring, and set it beside my bread plate. Denise inhaled sharply. Janine stared at the ring the way people stare at blood they did not expect to see. Her lips parted, but no words came. Marcus looked at her and said, low and disbelieving, "You have got to be kidding me." Denise whispered her daughter's name like a prayer and a warning together. Harold did not say a thing. He just watched Janine. I waited one last beat, hoping for anything to come true. An apology, a confession, a plea. Instead, she put her phone face down under her napkin, as if hiding it now changed anything. That small motion answered the question more clearly than speech could. I stood, picked up my jacket, and told Denise, "I am sorry to bring this into your house." She shook her head faintly, still staring at Janine. Outside, the rain had thinned to mist. The porch light buzzed with moths. My truck smelled like old coffee, and the cedar blocks I kept on the seat for no real reason except that my grandfather used to. I sat behind the wheel and waited for the shaking to start. It did not. What came instead was a numb steadiness that frightened me more. I drove to a 24-hour diner off Northern Parkway and ordered eggs I never touched. Around midnight, my phone lit up with Janine's name, then Marcus, then Denise, then Janine again. I ignored them all until Harold called. Something told me to answer. He said, "Where are you?" I told him. He said, "Stay there a minute," and hung up. 20 minutes later, he walked into the diner in a raincoat over church clothes and slid into the booth across from me. He looked older than he had at dinner. "She says it was emotional, not physical," he said. I laughed once without humor. He nodded. "I know. That is not much comfort." It was the wisest thing anyone said. Harold drank bad diner coffee and let me have my anger without trying to tidy it. I told him about the receipt, the hotel, the photos, the changed passwords, the anniversary lie. I even admitted how long I had been doubting myself. That was the hardest part. A man can say my wife betrayed me. It is harder to say I stood in my own house and let somebody teach me to mistrust my eyes. Harold listened with his hands folded. Finally, he said, "You do not owe anybody a performance of patience. Whatever you decide next, do it because you can live inside it." I slept in Leon's spare room that night, under a quilt that smelled faintly of fabric softener and old wood. His house sat on a quiet street, where the porch lights were warm and the train whistle carried soft across the dark. At 6 a.m, I woke to my own name spoken in a dream I could not remember. My phone held a long text from Janine. "Please come home. We can explain this." That word, explain, made me sit upright. Not confess. Not repaired. Explain. As if betrayal were a scheduling error. I texted back only once. "I am getting my things tonight." After work, I stopped first at a lawyer's office downtown. A woman named Celeste Warren, whose waiting room had 2 ferns and a bowl of peppermints nobody touched. I was not ready to file, but I wanted facts because facts are handholds when your emotions keep slipping. Celeste spoke clearly, not coldly, and told me what separation would look like, what documentation mattered, how the house could be handled. She did not ask whether I still loved my wife. She had probably learned that love and legal reality are often traveling in opposite directions. I left with a folder and a calmer heartbeat. When I reached the house, Janine was sitting on the front steps in one of my old college sweatshirts. That small theft of comfort annoyed me more than it should have. The maple on our block had just started turning, and dry leaves scraped along the curb. She stood when she saw me, but she did not come close. "Please, just hear me," she said. Her face was stripped down, no makeup, no practice softness. Tiredness had finally outvoted vanity. I said, "I will hear the truth one time. Not editing. Not spin." She nodded too fast, like agreement could save her. "It started with talking," she said. He paid attention. I felt she searched for a word noble enough to carry selfishness. "Scene," she finished. I almost smiled at the cliché of it. She told me she never meant for it to become secret, then admitted she deleted messages because she knew they would upset me. She said she met him outside work a few times because conversations felt easier in person. She said the hotel was just coffee in the lobby after a donor event because she did not want to go home angry from our anniversary fight. Every sentence had an excuse stitched into it. I asked the one question that mattered most to me. "Why did you stay silent at dinner?" Janine looked down at the porch boards. "Because if I chose you at that moment," she said softly, "I knew you would ask me to cut him off forever. And if I chose him, I would lose everybody." That answer cleared the last of the fog. It was not confusing. It was greed. She wanted time, options, sympathy, room to arrange consequences. I felt something settle permanently. "Thank you," I said. She looked up, startled. "For what?" I picked up my duffel from the doorway. For finally being honest. I packed over the next hour, while Janine moved through rooms behind me like a ghost with a law degree. I took work clothes, boots, my father's watch, the framed photo of my mother holding a blue ribbon pie at the state fair, my toolbox, and the little transistor radio I kept in the garage. I left the couch, the dishes, the wedding albums. In the hall closet, I found the umbrella we bought in New Orleans on our honeymoon after getting caught in a storm near Jackson Square. I held it a second, then put it back. Not everything deserved to be rescued. The weeks after that were not dramatic in the way people expect. No screaming on lawns. No tire-squealing revenge. Consequences are usually paperwork, silence, divided bills, and the dull ache of replacing habits. I worked, slept in Leon's spare room, met with Celeste, and ignored the urge to check Janine's social media through dummy routes like some pitiful teenager. Janine sent long emails at first, then shorter ones. She alternated between apology and autobiography, as if enough context could change damage into misunderstanding. Denise called twice to say she loved me no matter what happened. Marcus texted once. She blew up her life. I know. Thanksgiving came gray and cold. Leon's wife, Patrice, insisted I eat with them, and I did, though I felt like a borrowed chair tucked into somebody else's table. Their twins ran through the house with paper turkey crafts. Patrice burned the rolls a little and laughed until she cried. Later that evening, while helping Leon wash dishes, I realized I had gone almost 5 hours without thinking of Terrence Bell. That was the first true relief. Not winning, not closure. Just one stretch of ordinary time where my mind belonged to me again. Healing, I learned, often enters the room dressed as boredom. In December, Janine asked if we could meet once before the holidays to speak like adults who once loved each other. I nearly said no. Then I remembered a lesson from Harold's Diner advice. Choose what you can live inside. I did not want unfinished edges turning into sentimental fantasies later, so I agreed. We met at a coffee shop near the Walters, crowded enough to prevent theater, quiet enough for truth. She wore a camel coat and looked thinner. There was no glow left around her, only weariness. I noticed with detached sadness that guilt had made her finally resemble her age. She told me she had left the nonprofit. Not fired, but encouraged to resign after boundaries became office gossip. Terrence had moved on to another contract in D.C. He was not who I thought, she said. I almost asked what exactly she thought a man who entertained a married woman at hotels and harbor restaurants was supposed to be. Instead, I stirred my coffee and let her keep speaking. She said she had started therapy. She said she was learning that attention felt like oxygen to her because she grew up being praised mainly when she performed well. I believe that. It changed nothing. "Do you hate me?" she asked. Snow had started outside. Faint dry flecks spinning past the window. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter. I considered lying because hate is easier for people to carry than the truth. "No," I said. "I do not hate you. I do not trust you. And I cannot build a life on memory alone." Janine closed her eyes briefly. "There was a time we were good," she said. "There was," I answered. "But good history does not guarantee a safe future." She nodded like she was taking notes she should have taken 2 years earlier. The divorce moved slowly. Then all at once, January became signatures, disclosures, calendar invites from people paid to manage endings. We sold the row house in February. I walked through it one last time before settlement, touching walls I had painted and a banister I had repaired after Nia nearly tumbled down it at 16. In the kitchen, winter light fell across the table where we used to shell peas in summer and argue over whether raisins belonged in potato salad. Memory can make even poisoned places look holy. I stood there until the realtor cleared her throat gently and asked whether I was ready. Spring found me in a small rental in Woodlawn with creaky floors, a stubborn radiator, and a view of a bus stop where school kids gathered every morning in hoodies and bright backpacks. I bought mismatched dishes from a thrift store and a second-hand record player that only worked when the weather was dry. On Saturdays, I walked to a corner bakery for raisin bread and read the paper at a window table. I was lonelier than I told people. I was also steadier. Those are not opposites. Some forms of peace arrive carrying loneliness in one hand and self-respect in the other. In April, I ran into Harold outside Lexington Market while he was buying trout, and I was after crab seasoning and fresh greens. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You look like yourself again." Coming from him, that meant more than comfort. We stood by the produce stalls with people weaving around us and talked about tomatoes, bus routes, church nonsense, everything except Janine until the end. Then he said, "She is trying to become honest. I do not know if she will get there." I appreciated the sentence because it asked nothing of me. I said, "I hope she does." Months later, on a humid June evening, I found the ring. Not the wedding ring I left at Denise's table. My own spare band. The cheap silicone one I wore at work, tucked in the glove box of my truck, beside tire gauges and old registration papers. I rolled it between my fingers while cicadas screamed in the trees, and a radio preacher drifted from somebody's open window across the lot. For a second, I thought about all the versions of my life that had nearly happened because I stayed polite too long. Then I set the ring back down and shut the glove box. What people usually want from a story like mine is the clean ending, the apology that fixes everything. The affair partner was exposed and humiliated. The betrayer ruined it. Real life did not give me a neat final chord. Janine lost a marriage, a job, and the version of herself she had curated for her family. I lost a home, a future I had counted on, and the simple confidence that love means safety. What I gained came slower. Discernment, boundaries, and the nerve to leave when truth finally stood in front of me asking whether I could bear to accept it. If this story hits you, remember this. Betrayal usually starts small, but so does self-respect. Solomon got his answer the moment Janine protected her options instead of her marriage. Like this video. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more unforgettable cheating and relationship drama stories. What stays with me is not the ring on Denise's table or even Janine's silence. It is a smaller pattern underneath it all. The deleted messages, the anniversary lie, the porch confession where she admitted she stayed quiet because she wanted both time and options. That is the lesson here. Betrayal rarely begins with one dramatic moment. It grows in the places where somebody keeps choosing comfort over honesty. And recovery begins when you stop arguing with what their choices have already said. The end.